February 14, 2026, 10:49 in the morning. In 12 minutes, 847 calls flood Italian emergency lines, all reporting the same thing. The ground is tearing open. Steam erupts through cracks in pavements that stood undamaged for 30 years. The stench of sulfur floods residential streets. Buildings groan. Door frames that fit perfectly yesterday no longer close. And beneath the city, something is waking up. Seismologists at the Vesuvius Observatory stare at their screens in disbelief. The 550 earthquakes now registering beneath Pozzuoli are not random. They are forming a ring, a 9-kilometer circular fault line encircling 500,000 people, and it is activating section by section like a noose tightening. Stanford University researchers just unlocked something buried in the seismic record. Their AI expanded the earthquake catalog from 12,000 events to over 54,000. Tremors so small, conventional instruments never detected them. And hidden inside that data is a discovery that changes everything. The ring fault beneath Pozzuoli extends in a direct line, straight toward Vesuvius. For the first time since 1944, the mountain that buried Pompeii is showing synchronized movement with Campi Flegrei. They are not two separate volcanoes anymore. They are communicating through the bedrock. So what exactly is rising through that 9-kilometer fault corridor right now? Why are Italy's evacuation plans designed for millions of people suddenly useless? And what happens if the pressure building beneath Naples doesn't release slowly? Stay with me, because what the data shows next is something geologists thought was physically impossible. Most people think of volcanic danger as a mountain that explodes. Campi Flegrei is something far more dangerous and far less understood. This is a caldera, not a peak, a pressure vessel, 13 kilometers across, containing interconnected magma chambers at depths between 3 and 8 kilometers. Churches built during the Renaissance sit directly above molten rock, hot enough to melt steel. The ring fault system running around its outer edge has been locked for centuries. Pressure built, the faults held, until February 2026, when the AI expanded seismic catalog revealed what conventional monitoring had completely missed. The faults are unzipping, section by section. Each fracture that fails increases stress on the next section. The failure cascades around the ring. Dr. Geppe Mastronzo of the INGV Vesuvius Observatory calls it a progressive unzipping of the caldera's structural boundary. And when that boundary fails completely, the consequences become unpredictable. The ring fault has carved a 9-kilometer pathway straight down into the magma reservoir, and thermal imaging shows what is moving through it. Heat signatures are spiking along the fault at depths between 2 and 3.7 kilometers. In some zones, temperatures have increased 12 degrees Celsius in less than 96 hours. Gas emissions from the Solfatara crater have surged 340% in 2 weeks. Steam vents dormant for decades are now roaring back to life, visible from downtown Naples. The sulfur concentration is climbing. Hydrogen sulfide readings are off the charts. These are deep magmatic signatures, the kind scientists typically observe before major volcanic events, and the ground above it is rising. At 2 centimeters per month, a 340% increase over previous unrest periods. Fishing boats in Pozzuoli harbor now sit stranded in fields of grass. They rest on land that did not exist 5 years ago, land that rose from beneath the waves. Within 72 hours of the Pozzuoli swarm, seismic stations at Vesuvius recorded their first deep tremors in years. Not surface vibrations from settling rock, compression waves originating from the magma chamber itself, at depths of 4 to 5 kilometers. Satellite imaging then confirmed what the instruments were detecting: simultaneous ground uplift across both volcanic systems. The ground rises in Pozzuoli, and 25 kilometers to the east, the flanks of Vesuvius swell in direct response. The correlation is undeniable. The timing is synchronized. 2 volcanoes, mechanically linked through underground conduits that scientists believed were sealed for millennia. This is not the first time these systems have activated, and the historical record is not reassuring. 39,000 years ago, the Campanian ignimbrite eruption ejected 200 cubic kilometers of volcanic material. Pyroclastic flows traveled at 300 miles per hour across the Italian peninsula. The eruption column reached 44 kilometers into the stratosphere. Neanderthal populations in the impact zone were wiped out entirely. 15,000 years ago, a second catastrophic event, the Neapolitan yellow tuff eruption, carved the very caldera that now sits beneath Naples. Ash deposits from this eruption mark a distinct geological boundary layer, visible in rock formations from Italy to the Black Sea. A timestamp of catastrophe preserved in stone for 15 millennia. 3.5 million people now live directly above those ancient scars. The ancient Roman market at Pozzuoli tells the story without a single instrument reading. The columns of the Temple of Serapis once stood at sea level. They now rise high above the harbor. Halfway up those marble shafts, marine mollusks left their marks, proof that these pillars spent centuries underwater before the caldera lifted them skyward. The ground beneath Pozzuoli has risen 4.3 meters since 1950. That is 14 feet of vertical uplift, and the current rate is accelerating. The geology is not projecting, it is recording, and what it is recording should not be happening this fast. Within 96 hours of the ring fault activation, monitoring teams recorded something that stopped conversations in scientific offices across Europe. Synchronized anomalies across 3 separate volcanic systems. Campi Flegrei, Vesuvius, and 50 kilometers offshore, the volcanic island of Ischia. All 3 showed correlated pressure spikes simultaneously. Carbon dioxide concentrations increased at fumaroles, separated by 50 kilometers of crust. Radon emissions spiked in unison. Temperature anomalies appeared in synchronized pulses. 3 volcanic systems responding to the same deep geological trigger at the same moment. This is not coincidence. Seismic tomography reveals why. A vast magma accumulation layer stretches beneath the entire Campanian volcanic arc at depths of 8 to 10 kilometers. A continuous body of partially molten rock connecting all 3 systems. Seismic wave velocities drop at this depth. Electrical resistivity confirms molten material. Gravity anomalies map its extent. The February swarm fractured the seals on that network. The volcanoes of Campania are breathing together again. The air above Pozzuoli already tells the story. Residents report headaches, burning eyes, nausea, a metallic taste that lingers on the tongue. These are the symptoms of volcanic gas exposure, hydrogen sulfide and sulfur dioxide seeping through fractures that are new, fractures that appeared this month. In the Solfatara crater, mud pools bubble with increased vigor. The ground temperature in certain zones has reached 90 degrees Celsius, hot enough to cook an egg on bare rock. Municipal engineers mark new cracks with spray paint. They return the next day to measure again. The cracks grow. Some now span entire street widths. Buildings show separation gaps where walls have pulled away from foundations. Italy's emergency evacuation plans were built on one assumption: one volcano at a time. The Campi Flegrei plan moves people east and south directly toward the base of Vesuvius. The Vesuvius plan evacuates west and north, straight into the Campi Flegrei danger zone. The 2 evacuation routes cancel each other out. Traffic models commissioned by the Italian government show complete gridlock within 3 hours of an evacuation order. The Naples Ring Road, designed for 50,000 vehicles per day, would face demand 10 times that capacity. Families fleeing Pozzuoli would meet families fleeing Vesuvius at major intersections. The A3 autostrada, the primary evacuation artery, runs directly between both volcanic systems. The plans assumed the volcanoes would take turns. That assumption is now invalid. 3.5 million people. That is the population that must now be planned for as a single unified threat zone. The Italian Fire Service has 40,000 active personnel. The Naples International Airport has capacity to evacuate 50,000 people per day, in a crisis requiring millions to move simultaneously. The Port of Naples handles 10 million tons of cargo annually and would need to be diverted entirely. Supply chains across southern Europe would break within days. Pozzuoli Mayor Gigi Manzoni ordered schools closed for structural inspection after the February swarm. Technicians found cracks in 38 buildings, hairline fractures in load-bearing walls, damage invisible to the eye but potentially catastrophic if shaking continues. Every emergency protocol is being rewritten. Every hazard map is being redrawn. And the work must be done while the ground shakes beneath their feet. The volcanoes of Campania have been studied in isolation for generations. Scientists built separate models, drew separate hazard zones, made separate evacuation plans. The volcanoes cooperated with that approach for centuries. They no longer are. The ring fault is tightening. The corridor to Vesuvius is widening. The network connecting all 3 systems is reactivating, and 3.5 million people are living inside it, drinking espresso, sending children to school, going about their lives on ground that moves beneath them like a living thing. Every geoscientist monitoring the situation agrees on one thing. The question is not if. The question is when, and whether the world is ready for what comes next. Subscribe to stay with this story, because the data keeps coming and the numbers keep climbing.